Hmm. So, we've been talking about that mindfulness definition of paying attention in the present moment on purpose with non-judgment. And we've talked about lots of different ways to be on purpose or be intentional, deliberate, or to be in the present moment, that non-judgment. So I want to actually up the ante a little bit with you guys. There are even 3 different levels that we have of paying attention. So it's like we can pay attention in these different ways, and we can pay attention, with non-judgment and in the present moment from these 3 different viewpoints. And coming back to, the way we perceive information is through our senses. So we can be paying attention with our senses at these 3 different levels. The first level, like I'm going to use hearing for an example. So the first level is just observing. This would be just allowing sound, just allowing sound. You're just observing sound, which is different from labeling. Labeling is putting a modifier or an identifier on the sound. So you could be like, oh, that's traffic, or that's the sound of a person's voice, or that's an argument, or that's music. So labeling. The last layer of this way of perceiving or paying attention is through participation. So it's this, like, you're receiving information and you're watching how it evokes something in you. So I can be hearing a sound and notice my body relax, or I can be hearing a sound and notice everything tighten up, or I notice something and I feel warmth or curiosity, or I start mind wandering, or I start having thoughts, or I hear a sound and my thoughts go really, really fast. So there's this participation, which is this back and forth where I'm being impacted by the thing that I'm perceiving. And I call these 3 different layers, but they're not necessarily, better, good than, participation's better than observing. They're just 3 different ways of paying attention. And these 3 different ways can be very, very useful depending on the circumstance. So again, this idea that there's not, oh, judge it, don't do this here, do this here, but more like paying attention. When is it useful? Is this particular way of paying attention useful for this particular situation in this moment? So like one example of just, hearing, just allowing the observing hearing going. When my daughter was little, she would throw the biggest, loudest tantrums you could ever imagine. And she wanted me to be there with her. She wanted me close, but she wanted to be big and loud and have everybody know it. I like peace and quiet. The sound just like is nails on the chalkboard to me. And she'll be screaming and yelling, "You're so mean, you're mean, blah, 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 blah." And if I were to participate in the sound that was coming towards me, I'd be overwhelmed. It's like, I don't have the resources at the end of the workday to sit here and self-soothe myself while I'm trying to put up with this over here. And so there were times where I would just pull up my book, I'd sit there and I'd read, and I'd hear the sound coming and going. Oh, yep, she's still screaming. Yep. Oh, wait, it's calming down now. Okay. And there's just like the sound is just coming, filtering through. I'm not holding on to it. I'm not making meaning out of it. There's nothing for me to do with it. I'm just perceiving noise. It's just here. That's just what it is. We naturally do this in crowded places. Well, not this year, but normally walking through an airport or sitting in a busy restaurant, you filter out, the noise is there, but it's just kind of going through you. And this can be really useful It can be really, really useful to just allow sound, sight, sensation to go through you. And what's interesting is I was playing with this, and then today I was sitting earlier meditating, and I noticed just how busy my mind was thinking, but it was almost like this hearing sound. All the thoughts were just kind of floating through. I wasn't doing anything with them. I wasn't really paying attention to them. I could just hear the thoughts just going through. And it was a different way of being with my thoughts. I was just like, huh, yeah, there's noisy brain happening. And it didn't bother me one little bit. And I was just doing my meditation, just having the noise just of my thoughts just kind of go through me. And so practicing with sound can also help with those, just letting the thoughts go through you. You know, it's just observing. You're not engaging with it in any particular way. Labeling that, sound and putting a label on it can be really useful when someone is overactivated. So if, the stress response is really high, everything is just like, I need something to calm me down and bring me back into the present right now. Labeling can be very useful in grounding of just getting me back into the present moment. I'm like, I'm just going to look and find all the things that are green: curtains, stone, plants, another curtains, just green. Yeah, I'm just going to start labeling all the green things I see. Or I can just be listening. I'm just start labeling sounds. I can hear traffic. I can hear the air going. I can hear birds singing. Just labeling sound. And it can be a very good way of soothing and bringing that energy back down into, okay, I'm right here in this moment. I'm not completely boofed off into this stress response. And then participating can be really useful when you have the resources to sit with yourself and really experience what's happening. Of just like, I really want to know how I am responding in this situation. So it's like I'm noticing the sound come in, but I'm paying more attention to how it impacts me. So it's like, oh, I'm noticing, my stomach tighten up, or I'm noticing just the warmth happening. And that gives me information about the situation I'm experiencing right now. But it does tend to be a more resource intensive practice. So when the stress response is really high, immediately trying to go to participating isn't always so successful. And so sometimes it can be really useful to actually work through these different levels of paying attention, at different points of your own activation, or different levels of resource at that moment. So it's like, these are just 3 different skills. You can use them together. You can use them independently, but 3 different ways of paying attention. And it's the same, guidelines of just, no judgment, or just noticing when judgment happens. But it's like, okay, so I'm noticing, how I'm responding, or I'm noticing sound just coming through, just letting it be. It's like, if I just let my daughter yell and scream on the floor and read a book, I'm not going to judge myself for being a bad parent. I'm just going to say, oh, sound is coming through. That's just all that's happening. Just sitting there and just letting sound happen. So we're going to play with that today. I'm not sure how noisy your environments are. So it's like, you can, pay attention. It's amazing how much sound is there when you actually tune into it. It's like the noise of event, or the noise that you can see or hear from outside. If you find that your environment is deathly quiet, you can always make your breathing just a little bit louder, and just hear your breath. Notice what it's like to just hear breathing, and see if you can let it go without trying to analyze it. Or maybe you're breathing and you want to label. It's like, oh, that's a long breath, or that's a hitched breath, or that's a deep breath. You can label it that way. Or you can participate with that breathing sound of like, what does it feel like when you really hear the rhythm of the breath? What do you notice in your body? I notice myself kind of calming and opening. Or if you notice, the breath is short and panting, what do you notice? Do you notice your thoughts start to get faster in thinking? So you can participate with sound even with your breath. But experiment, see what you can hear in your environment too, as we start. And of course, I've got this lovely train going in the background. It showed up right on time for us today. So we'll go ahead and begin. Go ahead and get yourself all comfortable and situated. And as always, just starting with noticing breathing. Just a wonderful way of acknowledging, oh yes, we're stepping into the practice now. The brain loves those little cues that help it prepare. Like, yes, attention to the breath. This is meditation time now. Noticing the air at the nose, the inhale and the exhale. Feeling the change of temperature between the inhale and the exhale, where that air is just a little bit cooler on the inhale, a little bit warmer on the exhale. Following the breath from the nose, down the throat into the chest. Feeling the upper chest expand and contract as you breathe. Maybe noticing the movement of your shoulders as you breathe. That slight rise in the chest, the sternum pushes forward, the ribs open slightly, and then relaxes back down with the exhale. Maybe feeling the breath in your back, that little bit of pressure as your back presses into the chair behind you. The soft opening of your ribs underneath your arms with the inhale, relaxing back down with the exhale. Noticing the diaphragm, how that muscle right there at the edge of your ribs pulls down with the inhale and floats back up with the exhale. Maybe noticing if you're holding in your belly or if it's relaxed. Noticing what your belly feels like as the breath pulls down on that inhale and relaxes back with the exhale. And just noticing the rhythm of your breath right now, whether they're long and slow breaths, short and quick breaths, somewhere in the middle. Just letting that breath be whatever it is right now in this moment. It's nothing to change or fix. It's all just breathing. And as your mind wanders, you just notice it and gently bring it back to your breath as many times as you need to. Because that is the practice of mindfulness. Noticing, disengaging, and re-engaging over and over and over again. That deliberately moving your attention. And so from here, beginning to practice with these three different levels of paying attention, see what it's like to just hear, just observe hearing. Sometimes it's really difficult not to label. There's that immediate urge to go, oh yeah, that was a car that just went by. That's staying right inside of your breath, almost as if you are permeable and the sound waves just go through you and go on their way. You're not grabbing for any sound. You're not leaning forward into any sound. You're not trying to categorize it, but rather sitting, staying in your breath, and letting sound just happen around you. I know my mind immediately wants to jump and start labeling and seeing how many different sounds I can find and pointing them out. And so I just gently take my brain back and say, no, 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 right here. Just stay right here for a second. And sometimes my brain wants to just lock on to one sound. It's like, okay, if I lock onto the sound that I've labeled, then I can just let it go and let it flow through me. And that's okay. You just notice that's what your brain does. You breathe. You notice your inhale and your exhale. And let sound just happen around you. And from there, maybe beginning to label the sound. And sometimes when you sit there in the quiet, you start to notice those things that you don't normally notice. The ticking of a clock, the sound of the heater in the vent, maybe even a bird singing outside that you wouldn't normally pick up on. And again, if you're having difficulty noticing sound in your environment, you could make that breathing just a little bit more audible. See if you can even hear the difference between an inhale and an exhale. Or a swallow. Can you hear a swallow? What do you notice? You might even notice that tendency that when it becomes about you, your breath, your swallow, that you start to do something about it. There's that immediate urge to go, oh, well, why is that? I need to figure that out. How do I need to change it? So again, you just notice what your brain does. And you come back to just labeling. And then from there, adding in that participation or of being aware of how a sound impacts you. What does it evoke in you? What do you notice? I notice even just, you know, as I begin to listen and pay attention, there's that I'm almost leaning forward. My brow furrows a bit. It's like my concentration sharpens. There's this narrowing of focus. Like, oh, I want to get that sound. I can even feel my shoulders hunch up a little bit and forward. Or even there's that sense of, a train goes by and I kind of smile. For me, it evokes memory. I'm like, oh, that's home. I know that sound. Or there's a sound that, traffic, something revs its engine by quickly and there's a pulling into my belly. Just that bracing of just like, oh, I got to be on alert. Something speeding by really quick, and like a little jump or a flinch. Just playing and noticing. Or if you're noticing your breath, what does it feel like to listen to a rhythmic inhale and exhale? Or what does it feel like to hear a long what happens? And you can even begin to play with jumping between these three different levels of paying attention. You can even notice, is one level easier to be really present than another level? Do I tend to go to the future or the past more in one level or another level? Or does the judgment tend to creep in more when I'm paying attention through just observing? Or is it more judging when I'm participating and really paying attention to what it evokes in me? Just noticing. Again, there's no right or wrong, good or bad. It's all just being aware. Just cluing in, just like, oh, that's what's happening here. Isn't that fascinating? And from there, bringing all of your awareness back to your breath. Maybe even savoring and enjoying a deep inhale and exhale. Sometimes it just feels really good to have taken a few moments to come inside, to pay attention to that internal awareness. It can be very, very satisfying. And just taking a few more breaths. And when you feel ready, opening your eyes.